Hey y'all, welcome to the panel. Today we're going to talk about Moesha and the fat phobia. I know y'all seen it on Twitter. So let's have a conversation. What was y'all initial reactions to Moesha?
So I was super excited when I found out they were bringing it back on Netflix because has a little nostalgia tied into it. I was a teenager. I was around the same age as Moesha when the show was happening. But then I kind of remembered that certain parts were not going to age well, and I didn't think they were going to age as badly as they did in reality. Like watching it as an adult gave me a whole different outlook, and you kind of see that Moesha was not the best friends. Period.
Yeah, I actually was excited and ready to watch the show, mainly because I didn't really get to watch it as much as a kid. Like, I remember watching it, but I don't think I was as invested. So, also, I feel like I'm constantly trying to catch up on Black culture from the 90s. And it was exciting to see it. And then when I actually got into some of the episodes, I was really grossed out. I actually couldn't finish the first season. It was that bad for me.
I think for me, I adored Moesha. Like, I was a huge Brandy fan. I had the Brandy doll. I'm still Team Monica, so don't get it twisted. But I was a huge Moesha fan. I remember every single episode. And with that being said, I could not wait for the moment where we got to talk about her fat phobia because it annoyed me and it kind of plagued my childhood. This idea around Kim and the jokes and everything else, like that was a huge part of my growing up. So while I guess other people kind of, and I was in the I was born in 1990, so I wasn't a teenager when the show was on. So a lot of my peers, we were all watching it at the same time, but we weren't internalizing it as teenagers. We were elementary school children. So that definitely kind of changed the landscape about how I felt about my younger self.
Same for me. I guess like I was excited just like everybody else. And I'm like, yes, we putting some Black shows back on TV. We changing the discourses, like everybody was just so hyped over Netflix. And so when I started watching it, I was just like, oh my gosh. I was kind of upset. I was kind of upset that one, I guess like that I have this critical eye now where like I know these things that I didn't know in the past where I can enjoy certain things unconsciously. I'm like, dang, every show, every single time. And so someone had made a status and was like, I wonder how her friend felt. Like back in the day, I would love to have now, to just get like an interview or something from her to just see how she felt and like how that kind of impacted her career. But I will not lie, I was a little upset that I watched it with a critical eye. And I was more upset that Black Twitter was watching it with a critical eye too, because I just wanted to enjoy it and just let it be. But killjoy real quick. And I, just like the other folks, I couldn't get through it either. I just let it be what it was gonna be.
Well, I'm going to just tell y'all right now. I did not watch it. I've seen Moesha before, but I didn't watch Moesha. I tried to turn it on and I got through maybe like 15, 16 minutes. And I was like, this ain't good for my mental health because I set boundaries about fat phobia because one is I'm on the internet and so I have to be a part of these conversations all the time. And I personally choose not to watch television that is fat phobic because television is like my safe space where I don't have to like worry about, well, I try not to worry about real things that are happening to me. And so I was like, I gotta have a panel about this because I'm like, I couldn't get through it. And I don't even know how any other fat Black woman got through it. And so I'm just interested in hearing what y'all have to say about this.
I mean, certain episodes were extremely hard to watch, more so than others. Like the episode where Brandy and her Countess Vaughn's character Kim try out for the cheerleading squad. Like I was literally like my jaw dropped at certain points of that because it was just nasty and overtly fat phobic, and I feel like she would just really like these pot shots just kept coming at her, and at no point in time did anyone step in and be like, okay, this is really not funny. And I get it, during that, you kind of have to think about the time period of which that was created. Like during the 90s, we're still coming off of supermodels and the look was heroin chic. So they wanted you to be super thin. That was the low-rise jeans where you couldn't have an ounce of fat on you. So I get it in that time period, but it still felt viscerally wrong watching it as an adult. You're just like, so no one's going to advocate for this girl? Like, this is terrible.
Yeah, I actually had some similar feelings about that.
Well, I think what's interesting is that that's what kind of caused the divide for them in real life. So in real life, Countess Vaughn and Brandy did not get along. Also, Countess Vaughn ended up getting her own spinoff show, so I don't think that necessarily helped their relationship either. But it wasn't, to me, again, because I remember every detail of every single show. It's not just Countess Vaughn. It's Countess Vaughn in the earlier seasons. And then they didn't get enough of that. So then they added a fat white girl when she goes to college, right? And even that's like, they threw her in just to be fat phobic. There was no reason that girl was in the show because she was in 2 episodes. And then out of nowhere, then Moesha no longer has a roommate, right? It is literally a series based off of the fact that Moesha is skinny. She is skinny. She is small. She is thin. And we have to keep pushing that, even to the point that Niecy is too skinny, right? She's knobby kneed. She's very thin. She's flat this. And it's like, no, Moesha is perfect. Where it's like, nah, Moesha's kind of an asshole. And she should have took that Saturn. And she's driving around in this dust bucket. And Countess Vaughn can sing better and was finer than you. And we weren't supposed to realize that. I think that, one of the questions we're going to get to is, should we be critical 20 years later? Like, no. Like, some of the outfits, I'm like, oh, Jesus, wow, y'all really walked around in that, huh? Okay. Well, God grants grace, doesn't he? Okay. But some of the stuff, I'm like, well, they're not even in the 90s does Brandy sing better than Countess Vaughn. Right? And Brittany has a wonderful voice, but Countess Vaughn was a star, and they didn't want her to be a star. She was literally there to be a prop, and then she got way too big, and then they had to give her the Parkers. So the fat phobia in that show is not just on screen. We watch it play off screen, and literally going on to have, I think the Parkers had maybe 4 or 5 seasons. Mm-hmm. So I just think that it's interesting. Like, we're not just watching what it looks like in media or content. We're watching what it looks like and how it plays in relationships, and how it also plays in the end of her getting her own show, and how that show is even fat phobic. But I know we're not going to the Parkers today. But
so, does anybody else think that we should be critical of a show from 20 years ago?
I think we should, because I still think that today is still a thing. It's still a thing in Hollywood. It's still a thing in the music industry, TV. It's still a thing in our communities, and the Black community as well. So as someone who has fat little girls in their family, I think that I have to be critical of it and kind of think, okay, what is my response to this if this happens to my niece at school? If this happens to my son, I call my son my nephew. If this happens to my nephew at camp, because right now my niece is 10 years old and this is her reality. She continues to get bullied at summer camp, at school, within our family. And I will say that some of the stuff that was said on the show, people are still saying it 20 years later. And I was just, that part was just baffling to me, how this is generational, how this is constantly happening, and how are we addressing it. And so I'm just like, I need to address it at home first. Am I saying these things? Am I Moesha even in a fat body? Am I Moesha in a fat body? Am I, like, is my words, are these my thoughts, and how am I reflecting this onto the fat children that are in my family? So I think that we could be critical and learn from it and change our response to it, and how we treat people, how we talk to people, even checking ourselves in our own fat bodies.
Yeah, I think we should be critical as well, and not only be critical, but explain to writers that we still have not gotten accurate representation of a fat character in a show. The closest thing that I have gotten is the character in Euphoria, and while that character is a teenager, I think some of her journey was very similar to mine. And if I had just been able to see that growing up, maybe I wouldn't be so messed up a little bit. It's like, let's move the conversation forward. Let's, even in Insecure, one of the greatest shows right now for Black women, they're still doing my fat Black girls wrong. Like, I just can't do it anymore.
Liz is like, let me not touch on that again. Y'all, Liz, if y'all don't know Liz wrote an article. What was it when Insecure kind of first came out? I think it was season 1. Did you write
It was season one? It was season 1. And if you look up Liz Barlow, Kelly from Insecure, the article will pop right up. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's just that Kelly can't sing, but she's funnier, right? She has a more interesting life, but we would never know. I'm not going there.
Yeah, we already did our Kelly on Insecure episode, but I definitely found that to be interesting. So, is there anybody on the panel who doesn't think we shouldn't be that doesn't think we should be critical of a show from 20 years ago? Y'all like, not me. Oh, whatever. So I've seen on Twitter that some people think that like we should let art be art from the past and like not be critical of it. But I'll be honest, I think those people are saying it because it's about fat phobia. Because no one would say to Disney, who had like anti-Black art, we should be able to still see this anti-Black art, except white people. Like nobody Black is gonna say that. And I think it's interesting that they even put out a show with so much fat phobia in it and like brought it back, because it's like we could have different art by now. And then I don't think it does anything for fat people, because we don't have that many roles out. And so when you bring back something so extremely fat phobic, like what does that do for our representation? But with that being said, do you think that level of fat phobia is a part of our society like today in 2020?
Absolutely. Like, fat phobia is one of the last strongholds of discrimination that you can get away with. People always say, well, if you're fat, you can change, you can diet, you can do this. There's so many things out there. So they let a lot of things rock when they really shouldn't. And it still is a huge problem today, because if you look at shows with, like, for instance, people talking about how excited they are for Girlfriends, for nostalgia, because Girlfriends was like Black girl Sex in the City. Girlfriends had no fat Black characters, and they had one fat Black character, Tony Child's sister, played by Yvette Nicole Brown, and they were still making fat jokes. And these shows, Moesha and Girlfriends, have a good 10-year space in between them. So I don't think, it's gotten better, because there will always be, fat people in shows and media, and we are constantly pigeonholed into certain roles. There's always, the mammy trope. There's always, the comic relief, and there's always like the thirsty man chasing girl. These are the only roles that you see us depicted in. So it has gotten progressively worse, so to speak, because we know more now, we know better, and we're still doing the same things.
I think Absolutely, it's still prevalent 20 years later. But here's how it's prevalent. Because we don't get any other story. There's just no other story. There's just no other character, right? You mean to tell me by now there's no story about just a normal fat teenager that goes through the same stuff that Moesha went through, or she was dating, or like not even the Disney Channel. You don't even get a normal, except for what, Raven, but she wasn't like dating anybody. She was just into shenanigans all the time, right? It's prevalent because they want us erased. We're only allowed to be a supporting character. And even if we support, our support either has to be a magical Negro or we have to be a funny magical Negro, right? Like at any point, we have to fix the problem. We can't be a problem. We can't have problems of our own. We are there to serve a purpose to move the story along to resolution. But we can have no resolution of our own. You know what I mean? With Kim, which I loved, a lot of times, like, you know, you would see her dating a boy and like how that would work out, or how she ended up with Michael, who like adored her. I always loved that storyline because it always gave me hope that like, oh, that'll be me as a teenager. It wasn't, but I really enjoyed that storyline. But like, how did we not find out that her mom and her were going back to school together until what? Almost the last season that Kim was on Moesha? You couldn't put that in the storyline. That couldn't been a part of the show. We just serve a purpose to move the story forward. We're a plot tool. And that's still today. Kelly is a plot tool. Old Girl on Shrill, which some people really enjoy. I'm never really going to enjoy white women. But the point is, Old Girl is a plot tool. Like, she moves the story forward. She's not really any part. So yeah, it's 2020 into 2021. And until one of us makes the story, produces the story, and then pitches it, gets denied, goes back, and then, goes through that whole arbitrary process, it won't be anything different. Because they don't care. They just see fat people as like, I think Danielle made a good point. It's like, oh, well, you can lose weight. And it's like, yeah, I could, but that's none of your business. And even if I did lose weight, that doesn't mean I'll be any less of a fat person. I could just be less fat. So what's the difference? Like, do I not still deserve a love story? Do I not still deserve a friendship story? Do I not deserve to be Tony Childs? Because you're never going to be that. You're never going to be Molly. You know, you're always going to be a device, a product.
It's interesting that you say that. You said something that just really like alarmed me. It made me think of like Baps. That was a fat best friend role. Bebe's kid, the dark-skinned fat black woman, in that role. We had Shrill, fat black woman, as a best friend. And it'll be interesting because Shrill is based on a true story. So it'll be interesting if the author really did have a fat black best friend, or they just chose her for diversity. Nobody's Fool, Amber Riley played, I think, was that Tinka Sumter's sister or best friend? Something like that. So it's like, even we just keep seeing like this fat black best friend role played out over and over and over again. I'm like, I feel like I can name even more fat black best friend shows or movies.
Jill Scott was in that movie with Paula Patton, and she was the nasty best friend. And she was the sad best friend in Why Did I Get Married? Right? It's just like, well, first of all, bitch, can I at least be a sister? Can I be a aunt? Like, I literally can't even have relation to you. I literally just have to be, that's my best friend. No, ho, we not friends. Anytime you want to tell me I can't be what, they was going to be the Divas of Soul, and then they told, they was on the three-way call, which has caught up many of people, including me, back in the day, and they was like, oh, I hope they have spandex. Like, what plot device did that even serve? Y'all want the girl to wear the costume, but then you're going to talk about her wearing the costume? That makes no sense. This is why I stopped hanging out with skinny people in high school.
Oh, this reminds me of another show that I'm going to let somebody else go, which is Girls Trip. Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah was the broke fat black best friend who couldn't control her money. Dang. I don't went on. Yeah, this is crazy. But anybody else have thoughts about how this shows up in 2020?
Okay, but there's one really, fairer depiction of fat black women. I don't know if you guys have watched this. It's called First Wives Club. It's a BET show. They have Michelle Buteau. They have Jill Scott, and it's a fairer depiction because, like, I don't even remember mentions of their weight. They're dating. They're fashionable. Like, they're actually fully realized characters, and they do have a skinny friend, and she never brings any of that shit up. There's no fat phobia there, and I was really shocked. Like, I was on Twitter, and Michelle Buteau liked the quote because I was like, this, like, it made me feel good after I watched it. I was like, when is the second season coming? Because there was clear character development. They weren't, chasing after some man. It was a really well done show, and I'm like, if they could produce this, why isn't this a thing now? Why can't everybody get in line and push this narrative further?
So, I don't know if y'all seen on Twitter, but people are saying that Kim was not even fat, and people are just like making this a fat thing. Kim was not considered fat. I have my thoughts, but I'm interested in what y'all think.
I feel that, and it reminded me of the conversation that you all was having earlier about like a small fat and a bigger fat. And I saw a little of that conversation on Twitter, and I think that people, so it was like how she carries the weight, right? And so I was just kind of, it just rattled me, and I'm just like, how she carried the weight. And like, so like in the fashion industry, plus size models, but they have like this really smooth belly and like this hourglass frame, but they're considered plus size. So even then it's showing representation without showing representation. And so I think they try to kind of fit her in because like she had bigger breasts, and it was like, oh, well, that was her breast. Her breast was just big. And I'm just like, are we really gonna do this? Just any type of way to just diminish it, to just make it seem like, oh, it ain't cause she fat, it's because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, let's just pull it back. Let's just take all the crap off, and let's just call it what it is. It was because she was fat. It wasn't because her breast was big. It wasn't because of like all these different things. And I feel like people in conversations just add these extra additives on just to be like, it ain't cause you fat. Like, just say it. Yes, it is. It is fat phobia. It's because I'm fat, and you feel you have these ideals about me and these stereotypes about me because I'm fat, but you try to dress it up as if it's something else to kind of just take away from that. So I did not appreciate that conversation at all, because I feel like, once again, it's just diminishing the voices of fat folks and just blaming it on something else instead of addressing how people really feel about fat people in the world.
I saw that conversation as well, and a couple of my friends on the timeline were like, I understood where they were coming from. So I can understand that the sentiment is fat phobic. I don't know that they were being fat phobic, but that's a different story, right? I think the issue is we will find any way to say that a person is not something so that we can other them, right? It's just another process of othering. So it's like, oh, well, she not like black, she mixed, and she this and she's that. It's just like a form of exoticism, right? Where you as a person of that group, like, I'm a fat black woman, I am looking at Kim, and at best she's chubby, right? Like, if people didn't want to call her fat, which I don't know why, she's chubby. She's much bigger than all of the women, including D, except for maybe Andell, right, on the show. Why are we debating whether or not those jokes about her weight were based off of that, right? Because they gave Niecy some jokes, but mostly it was like, Niecy, you're poor. Niecy, you're ashy. Niecy, you're knobby-kneed, right? They specifically targeted Kim on her weight. So if they didn't target her on her weight because she's fat, then are all of us dreaming? It just feels like an elongated gaslighting, right? It's like, oh no, you don't see that. She's not a fat girl. She's not one of you. She's one of us. We made that up. It's like, you're not going to tell me I'm crazy. You're not going to piss on me and tell me it's raining. Like, that's not, I know what a fat girl looks like. I looked like that at 15 and had to wear Lamb Bryant clothes in high school, right? Like, she was not wearing 579 or whatever they were wearing. Like, they had to outsource outfits for her. And it wasn't just because of her boobs, it was because of her arms too. It wasn't just because of her butt, it was because of her hips and her thighs too. And as the seasons progressed, she got bigger because that's what the fuck happens when you get older. So to say that she's not fat or she wasn't even all that big, it's like, yeah, I'm sure she wasn't all that big now that we're looking back on it. And as a like 8-year-old Liz or 7-year-old Liz watching her, and then 30-year-old Liz watching her, she does look distinctly different. I'm like, I don't know why. I thought in my mind she was like a size 20, and she's not. At best, in the earlier season, she's like a 12, 14. That's still plus size. You still in the back of Forever 21. You still have to come through all the racks of the clothes to go get your outfit, to go to the same party at the den, right? So to other her, to take her out of that pool, so it makes you not look fat phobic when you watch the episodes, you can miss me. You can just laugh at the jokes and tell me that you're fat phobic or you enjoy fat phobia in comedy without trying to remove somebody we know is one of us.
So in the first episode, I was like, I'm not watching this because Moesha, and I had to roll my eyes like that because it still triggers me. Moesha, like they were like sitting at a table together, and Moesha made like a comment about her weight, or was like trying to avoid a comment about her weight, but still hit her with like a fat phobic jab. I think she was like asked her was she fat or not or something. I forgot which scene this was, but this was episode 1. And so I'm interested in y'all thoughts. Like, do y'all know a Moesha in your life, or have y'all met a Moesha?
I feel everybody has had a Moesha in their life at one point in time. Like, when you grew, especially like during that time period, I'm an 80s baby, 90s kid. So, being in that bubble around the same time, especially like going to prom, shopping for prom dresses was hell because my friends were smaller. They could just go in a rack. I like this. The midriff Britney Spears thing was in, and I knew in no way, shape, or form could I even get that aesthetic. So I had to go to like the bridesmaid section because that's the only place that carried the double-digit sizes. I had to choose from certain colors. You had tons of black dresses to choose from, but you didn't have like a sparkly pink that, Brandy's Cinderella vibe. That wasn't in your size. So, being at that time period, it was incredibly frustrating. And you just felt like, damn, I'm never really going to have like fit in or have that little niche. And a little backstory on retail during that time period, there were 2 juniors plus size places that you could shop for in the 90s. It was Sears. It was called Mainframe at Sears. And the stuff was so ugly and matronly. And then there was another one in Lane Bryant where this is like before they had Cacique and all that other stuff, where you could buy like youth-friendly teen clothing, but it was still matronly. You couldn't find like the low-rise jeans with the butterflies on them, the matching little hair clips, but it was difficult. And it made you feel at that time like, damn, not only do I not fit in with my peers, I can't even fake the fit in with them. It sucked.
So, like, fortunately, my family was quite supportive, like, growing up and being fat, because everybody in my family was fat. So, in my family, like, fat was a thing. It really, being fat, because I feel like my grandma, looking back, went out of her way to take me to Sears to make sure. I remember Sears, and I was upset because I'm like, why are we up in the junior section? Why are we in the Missy section? Like, why are we not over here? So I definitely felt that. But high school was the worst, especially when it came to just coming into my identity and starting liking boys and found out that I wasn't the sought out person, like my friends were. And my friends at the time were Moesha, like, all you have to do is lose weight. All you have to do is in gym and I'm just like, how did we get here? How did we get here? And I wish I knew what I know now, but I remember going to sleepovers and being treated so differently at sleepovers with my smaller peers, and coming home crying like, I don't want to go to another sleepover. And my grandparents like, you just not being social. You just need to put yourself out there. And at the time I couldn't say it, like, they treat me so different because I'm fat. And I see it with my niece, with her friends, and I see that the way that they look at her, the way they talk to her, the way they treat her, and she's so confident, it's crazy. And I tell them she's gonna be a problem because she ain't gonna be that type of fat girl. And I try to instill that in her, but everybody responds to that so differently. Bullying is bullying. I'm still experiencing bullying at 28 years old, and I'm just like, I thought that was a childish thing. It is very much an adult thing. And I'm just like, okay, so is this the reality? And how much am I adjusting versus how much I'm standing up for myself? So yes, it's hard out here, especially working in the medical field and being in the medical field. It is horrible working at a hospital and a clinic being a plus size person.
I think what's interesting for me is that growing up, my best friend was also fat, but she was a smaller fat, and both her and I were like right on the edge of like the juniors plus size. Like we were like one step away from Lane Bryant. I don't really know what that size is, but that's where I was at as a teenager. But so I don't think I really experienced much bullying from outside people. My bully was my best friend, because she was a little bit skinnier than me. And she also had pretty privilege at the time, where I was a teenager and still trying to figure out life. And she had an older sibling. So that older sibling gave her all the guidance in the world and was like ready to just like bring her into the teen world. And I was over here just, what is white eyeshadow? What do I do? And so she used that against me every step of the way. And I think I had a very tough time growing up because I was interested in all these boys, and boys were coming to us, but they were coming to her, not to me. In fact, I actually had a boyfriend who didn't dump me, instead wrote her a letter and was like, be my girlfriend while we were still dating. It was a weird time.
Girl, if you want to fight him, let me know. Try Jesus, don't try me. Anyway, I I don't have those experiences from teenage years. I distinctly remember, because I was so bullied, I moved around. So I grew up in North Carolina, then we moved to Connecticut, then we moved to Virginia. So after middle school, because my best friend in middle school was the skinny, pretty girl, and while she never treated me poorly, I always distinctly remember people making me feel othered and outsidered. That's not a word, but making me feel different than her because she was skinny and pretty privileged. And I literally, on my last day of 8th grade, was like, I will no longer have any skinny friends. Like, all of my friends will be my size or bigger. And so when I got to high school, my main group of friends, all of us were the fat girls. And that made prom dress shopping a little easier when all of us have to go look in David's Bridal to get our dress, because that's where we got it from. It made homecoming a little easier, where everybody has to go with the date, and it's like, nope, the four of us are just going together again. So while my Moesha was mostly elementary school or middle school, I just knew to turn it off. Like, I wasn't going to experience the bullying I had in middle school. And I sought out other fat women who were my size. We could go to the mall together and go in the same 2 stores. And I just never experienced that. And partly because of the content that I took in as a child. Like the shows I watched, I never wanted to be Kim Parker. I didn't want to be Nikki Parker. I wanted to be something that was what I considered desirable.
I'll tell y'all though, I used to have this huge obsession with Monique when I was a child. And I did want to be Nikki Parker, but that's a whole nother subject. We will be talking about the Parkers when it comes out. We will be talking about the Parkers, okay? So some of y'all were talking about different Moeshas or the lack of Moeshas in your life. But even if you didn't have Moeshas in your life, did this show have an impact on you when you were a child?
For me, no. I think I was still a little too young to interpret anything. But I will say, watching the Parkers, I might have more to say when it comes to fat phobia.
For me, definitely. It definitely had a huge influence on me because that was like my generation. That was my age group. To the point where, to my prom, I wore this hideous, Brandy had like a CoverGirl contract. I wore this hideous pink sparkly lipstick just because Brandy had advertised it. I was like, okay, I'm going to support the team. But watching that definitely brought up a lot of memories. And if you even look at the fashion, a lot of the trends that were in the show, they were not plus size friendly. You could not find a plus size friendly version of anything you saw Brandy wearing that show. So even if you did like her and she was like your idol and you wanted to be like her and, you know, dress like her, you couldn't do that if you were plus, unless you had a sewing machine. So it definitely did affect me a lot growing up.
I would say it didn't affect me because I didn't watch it with a critical eye. I was just laughing and enjoying the show like my sister was, you know. So I don't think we ever had a conversation like, oh, I'm tired of the fat jokes, or I'm tired of them making fun of her. We was just blindly watching Moesha because everybody was watching Moesha, and Moesha was that's what you watched. And so it was just something to talk about with my friends. I remember, girl, you saw Moesha in the journaling. That's why I got into journaling, because Moesha would write in her journal. So it was like, I know for a fact I did not watch it with a critical eye, and I just wanted to be with my group of friends talking about Moesha, because if you wasn't, you was a lame. if you weren't watching Moesha.
Yeah, it had an effect on me as a child. I distinctly remember somebody calling me Kim from the show, or you Kim Parker, just like a reference to my weight. So I think it definitely influenced me as far as dating in two different ways. So one, like again, seeing Kim being adored by Michael, I always thought it was possible. I was like, you just have to find the right one. You have to like leave the other boys alone and find the one that wants to adore you, and that it's possible to be loved in the body that you have and that you occupy. And then also it influenced me in terrible ways because like, wow, I was like, ooh, Mo should be cheating. I think that's a good idea. And I think that her just running around and having 8 million different boyfriends and then them all coming to her birthday party has been a good fear of mine for the last 30 years. So, yeah, that's not a great influence, but the Kim part was nice.
So piggybacking off of what you're saying, Liz, I have a question, folks. Do you think Kim's role on Moesha specifically, was it empowering or was it a stereotype, or was it both for y'all?
Watching it now, I would say that I think it's a little bit of both. Definitely a stereotype, and it didn't make me feel good watching it, but her own scenes and like her explaining her sexuality and how she defines it in that moment was also empowering.
the one bright spot about Moesha is Kim really didn't care. Like, Kim let them jokes slide off her back. She didn't really let them get to her too much. And she still was true to herself. She was still fabulous. She was still over the top. And she still kind of did what she wanted to. I mean, I wish she would have clapped back at Moesha a few times, but I get it. She's, you know, she's a supporting character to the lead character. You can't really have that type of dissension, at least on camera. But there were moments where I'm kind of like, yes, Kim, finally. Like, I love that. But there were some parts that were just really cringy. But I think she did, in her own way, push, you know, the culture forward. She was a positive depiction of a fat woman. Like, I can't begrudge her and say she set us back. No, she was true to that era, and I think she did an amazing job. And Countess Vaughn needs her flowers. She deserves her flowers.
I would say that I agree with Danielle. Like, she was the fact that Kim never really let it get to her, like the Halloween episode where they all are supposed to dress up. She was like, "Oh wow, yeah, I don't think I should wear that outfit. Bet I'm gonna wear something tighter and cuter, and I'm gonna be the life of the party, and y'all gonna be over there sitting looking foolish." So it definitely taught me to, like, you know, step my quips up, you know, and step my clap back up. It's like, not, you know, your clap back doesn't always have to be this. It could just be showing up with the cute boy in the cuter outfit, you know. So I think that it gave, you know, little fat girls, like, you don't have to take the bullying. Or if you're gonna take the bullying, you can show up and be the belle of the ball.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because that specific scene just like reminds me of how much fat black women have to be confident, and like it's like an forced thing and it's out of trauma. Like, even though Kim is confident, I mean, I don't want to say it's always out of trauma, but some of it does come from being bullied. It's almost like you accept it or you figure out how to like yourself and be like, F everybody, I'm gonna be me. And so I do think that, like, oftentimes, like, fat women, fat girls have to develop their confidence before they can even, you know, leave their teenage years, because they've experienced so much. And it's like, what do I do? And Kim is that example of that. Even though, you know, like, she had a confident mom, I wouldn't say that came from, uh, didn't only come from her like being bullied, but she did have a confident mom, but her mom didn't show her that with guys, let's be honest. But I wouldn't say that, like, Kim's confidence is something that's unfamiliar to me, because I think a lot of fat black women have to be confident. Do y'all think that roles for fat black women have gotten better? Are there any lessons that Moesha can teach us?
Unfortunately, I don't think it has gotten better. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of baffling. No, it's baffling that it hasn't gotten better. Especially given the movements that is happening with fat black women, and the fight that is happening for fat black women to be seen in a different light, to be seen in different spaces. I don't think it's gotten better. I know, like, I was done watching movies with fat black women in it when I don't know, was it Empire? Was it Empire? When Gabby, the scene when Gabby was about to have sex, and I hate that I got on Facebook after that episode because it was just this so much hate speech. I went so far to label this hate speech about fat women, and like how folks didn't see us as sexual, or like, oh, y'all out here having sex, and y'all having sex with attractive people, and you enjoying it, and you orgasming, and you know, so it was just like, I was just done with like movies with fat black women in it, because I was just tired of it. And I was tired of going back and forth with people about it. I was tired of fighting for my space and fighting for, like, y'all really think that I'm not having a fulfilled life out here because I'm fat? And so it just became exhausting. So I will say that we have a very long way to go. And I'm hoping with Black people, this is our time right now. And so I'm hoping that Hollywood use this time to show up and show out for fat Black women, period.
Pray about it.
No, I don't. I mean, it's the same role over and over again. And every now and then what you'll get is like a Precious, where it's just a bunch of tragedy. It's just tragedy porn, right? Like it has nothing to do, I mean, a lot of it has to do with fatness and fat phobia, but they're not necessarily a stereotype, but they're just horrible people, right? Like Monique was a horrible person. Precious was in a horrible, or Gabby Sidibe was in a horrible situation. But it's like, oh, okay, thank you. That's a nice Oscar for her. And then she has to go back to being the loudmouth, drunk, fat aunt. Wonderful. There's no other role unless you write it. Unless I can't. I literally in 2020 cannot think of a show that in the last 5 years that has produced a fat character that was not a stereotype, minus the 2 episodes of The Game where he was Malik was dating that fat girl, and she was like a fat journalist, and she was like, yeah, you don't have to hide me, or we don't, like, she was a wonderful journalist, she was on point, and he was hiding her, right? And so she wasn't a stereotype, but the storyline was the same. So yeah, no, we just gonna have to write the character.
So beauty is a form of soft power. A lot of people don't want to broaden the definition of beauty because it takes the power out of their hands. It is very easy for thin Black creatives to create wonderful, luscious roles for themselves and not include fat women, because if they broaden that definition, there's now real competition. Behind every skinny Black creative is her fat friend who is supporting and pouring into her. And I mean, I look at a lot of these people in power, like the Issa Raes and the director, what's her name, that did the Black female director, her name escapes me right now. And I'm wondering, do you have real life fat friends? Like, check your circle, because y'all can speak diversity to the cows come home. But did you, like, I wonder if Issa Rae had a fat friend, sat down and said, what do you think about Kelly? Like, is this okay? Because I doubt it. Because if she did, she would realize, like, wow, I'm really out here wilding. Like, I'm really bugging out. This depiction is really wrong. And we're in the 4th season now of this, so you can turn it around. And like I said, the only positive depiction that I've seen is First Wives Club, and that wasn't hyped up or blown up. BET has had that show for like a year and a half now, and you hear nothing about it. And it's good enough to be on BET full time, but then you put on crap like Tyler Perry's Sisters, where it's just struggle and woe, but they all skinny Black women, and there's no fatties, so you gotta watch it. It's for the culture. So I mean, as much as I would like to say it's changing, there's still some people who are happy that the stagnation is there and they benefit from it. I mean, Tyler Perry himself has made money off of miserable Black women tropes, fat Black women tropes, and she chasing the man. She'll never get what she wants. Like, it's tiring, bro. And you would get so much more viewership and love if you show a fair and accurate depiction.
You know, it's so interesting. Medea is back. Y'all know that, right? It's on BET Plus. Tyler Perry, I think, made a new play for Medea. Don't quote me, but I think Medea is back with new art. I was like, oh, Medea is retired, so Tyler Perry about to retire. No, ma'am. And I just want to make a comment about Sisters, which is interesting. Danny, which is the bigger character, but she's not a big girl. Like, I see that a lot of fat phobia was written into her like role, that she's like broken and broke, and she's like Kelly. She is literally playing Kelly's role on Sisters. She's funny, she can't keep a man, and she's not big, but she's definitely bigger than the other girls, the other women. And so like I immediately noticed that in the friendship dynamic. I even thinking of Greenleaf, how Charity is a hot mess. I'm like, Charity gets no justice. Charity is not big, but I constantly see the bigger character in many shows. They have like the worst role. It's almost like they threw you in there. I'm interested. I want to go back to something that you said, Danielle. You said that you feel like a lot of thin Black women, you specifically mentioned, are not broadening the scope to include fat Black women because of this ideal of beauty and how it gives you privilege. I've said this in the past, and many people have said, but we're all struggling as Black women, and Black women as a whole haven't gotten visibility, kind of been told to like wait my turn. um do you think that is a possibility that maybe a thin Black woman and a fat Black woman could like co-write a show? Maybe it doesn't have to be a fat Black woman alone, because we do see that thin Black women are getting a chance to write the most. Like, what do you think?
Thin Black women are still very much in that they're kind of like double agents for fat phobia. Yes, you are a Black woman and you understand that struggle, but unless you have a close fat friend or you've been fat at one point in your life, there are certain nuances that you're not going to see. You're not going to be able to write from that perspective. I believe art at its truest form has to come from your own personal experience. And if you're shutting down those voices in conversations about fat phobia, you may not be well equipped to, bring it up. Like, I know Issa Rae, people have brought it to her attention on how, Kelly is, Kelly is an interesting character, but she's not fully fleshed out. Like, I watched season 4 and I'm watching like the story. You see Tiffany's storyline, you see Issa's growth, you see, Molly's growth or lack thereof in this season. And here's Kelly still over here played to the left. Like, she didn't contribute to everybody's emotional well-being. They definitely drain Kelly of emotional labor, because every time something goes wrong, everybody's calling Kelly and they never acknowledge it. And that's wildly irritating. And Issa Rae has to be cognizant of it. And if she's not cognizant of it, she has to have, like, it, that proves that she has no one in her circle like that. You're telling me no fat family member, no fat friend has pulled you to the side of like, look, sis, you are doing great things. And I'll never begrudge her that. She's doing amazing things. But you leave us out of the conversation in every piece of art you produce. And that sucks. Because you have the podium, you have the floor. If you open doors for all of us, not just the forms of Blackness that you feel are appropriate or you feel the world should see.
So I know that Issa has seen it, because I know that Kelly has seen it, because she blocked me. So I know that she knows, right? That was the first season. It got re-popular again because someone popular shared it, was like, yo, I found this article and it's still true, right? We know. She's heard it. And all we ever get back is, well, Kelly writes her character. First of all, that's bullshit. She doesn't write her character. She's in the writer's room, which means she could work on anything. She could be working on Tiffany's lines. That doesn't mean she writes her character. And just because you're in the writer's room does not mean you get to write the storyline. It means you get to work on the punch-ups, the jokes, all of that, right? So, no. A fat woman or two fat women or a writer's room full of fat women or fat people need to write a show. No skinny person, no small person, and I would even venture to say not even like a smaller fat needs to be involved, right? Because if you want a true, fair depiction of what it is like to date, live, exist as a fat person, that can only come from people who live, exist, and date as fat people. You can't do it where Issa Rae has never been. Molly, she is a small woman, right? And that's not a dig or anything at her. She's just a small woman. You can't put Yvonne Orji in a room and expect her to understand why I, am a viewer, am upset that Kelly is 28 years old wearing a Ashley Stewart shrug in the club. You're not gonna get that, right? Because to you, you're like, well, she's wearing club clothes. No, bitch, she looks like she's ready for revival. That's not what you wear in the club at 28, at 30, when everybody in here is in Givenchy and you're in BCBG and you're in all these designer or maybe even lower designer clothes. You couldn't put that bitch in some Ava and Viv? No, you cannot, because you cannot depend on what we are in their mind to write our storylines. Because I exist in your mind. To say that fat people don't exist in your mind is ridiculous, right? Because we live rent free. Because anytime you arguing back and forth with somebody and you get the best of them, the first thing they bring up is your weight. So we live rent free, right? So I can't depend on your depiction of what fat people look like, what we exist like, and what we date like for you to be like, I got it. No, because then I should just depend on white people to write stories about Black people for me.
And I can't depend on it. I guess I was just asking that question because a lot of people say we're all Black women, and so we're all being impacted by our bodies. And so that if there's one set of group that we shouldn't be critical of when it comes to art, it is Black women's art. So that's kind of where that question came from, because I've been hit with I can't be critical of Black women's art because of racism and misogyny that's hit at Black women. But look at y'all faces. Y'all like the audacity of someone. But to move us on, with that being said, do y'all think that like we should put out all of these childhood shows that we had? Like we got the Proud Family coming back, which that has some issues with identity, but we got the Parkers coming out. We have Girlfriends coming out. Or would y'all just like to see new shows? And yeah, go ahead.
Put the shows out because they're going to open up conversation. As an adult with this whole Moesha thing, I'm still friends with some of my friends from high school, and I've had the conversation before I did this panel, and I was like, listen, we all were in the same high school, shared lockers. Let me tell you what I was thinking during this period of time. And a lot of them didn't even know the struggles I had went through. A lot of them didn't know, like, I hated going to prom because I literally got my dress from JCPenney because it was the only one in my size. There were no options. So I had to go put on a smiley face and be the funny fat friend. I couldn't really, express my, wow, this really sucks that I can't wear what everybody else is wearing. So it opens up this conversation. And let's be real, within the Black community, fat phobia is a thing. Everybody got a big, a larger size Medea, Big Mama, Grandma, Mama, but will still laugh at the fat jokes in 90s shows like Martin, like the 90s shows, that we all really loved. And I get it. It's nostalgia surrounding it. It brings you back to a simpler time. But we have to discuss the things that were talked about in these shows. Because if not, it's going to keep perpetuating it. Like, if we don't sit down and really look at it as a whole, as a community, we're going to keep it going.
As a creator, I'm like, absolutely release these shows, because that's how people get residual checks, right? And I want Black people to get their money. Like, I don't know how many times a day you can watch Friends or Seinfeld, and those shows are not funny at all. So I absolutely want the Moeshas and the Parkers and Girlfriends and everything else to come out, because I want them to get their money. And I do think that they prompt a conversation, but I also, while at the same rate, white people are getting shows that make absolutely no sense. You can go to Netflix and watch some of the most ridiculous. I watched Warrior Nun, okay? It's a decent enough show, but who in the hell wrote that show, right? Like, white people get to have mediocre, ridiculous, throw whatever at the wall, see if it sticks shows. Black people should be offered those same opportunities.
Go ahead. Okay, so I agree. I think that put the shows out because it has called for good conversations. I always can appreciate Black Twitter, I'm not gonna lie. I like how it started these conversations, and it kind of brought back to light that, and just like some self-reflection from people that I saw on my timeline, was like, dang, in high school, I remember this, I remember doing this. And I think we need the shows like everyone else said, to talk about them, but just don't put them out just for remembrance sake. Put it out to be like, this is, we recognize that this is what the past was. This was past Hollywood. And this is how we're going to get better. This is how we're going to remove these type of punchlines, these type of language, this type of talk, these type of jokes from shows, and like look at those characters and, like you all said, the plot, the storyline, and like where these characters ended up, and we gonna do better. And so we can't say that history hasn't, that there's no history of this, that we just pulling this word, you know, right out of our hats. No, this has been shown to us on media. Media controls the masses. And so I think that is, keep the shows, use it as think pieces, and definitely use it to make change right now. Like right now, we need this like 3 weeks ago. We need this to happen ASAP, because it's tiring and it's exhausting. And someone who's raising a fat Black girl, it's exhausting. I want her to have a safe show to look at. I want her to see herself in media, because everybody ain't strong, you know, everybody can't deal with it, you know, like maybe like we have, you know, so it affects children differently. And I don't want my niece to grow up in this. It's too much.
Thank you. And I'm gonna say this, and then we're gonna be done. For me, I would say that putting those shows back out only makes sense if like fat people are able to have conversations about them in the mainstream. Because what I've seen happen with conversations about Moesha is a lot of thin influencers are being coined for quotes about like fat phobia on Twitter. And really the people who are doing the work or living in these experiences are not being visible in these conversations. So it's like, because I mean, I'll call somebody out, but it's not really their fault. Jessie Wu like had a conversation on their platform about fat phobia, but then they were not able to continue to communicate with their audience about it. And they oftentimes go back and forth with their audience, but they weren't, because they're not fat and they don't really know what they're talking about. They just like heard fat phobia basically probably from some conversation a fat person started about Lizzo, and they're like, oh, we should start having these conversations now. And they can't unpack it at all. And so my thing is like, our voices have to be a part of the unpacking of these shows, or they're going to continue to be a part of our culture in the same way they were 20 years ago, because we're not being able to speak about it. So I just want to end us off on that. I'm so glad y'all joined in on this panel, and I'm going to see y'all next time.